Thank you very much for accepting to speak at this very important event. Thank you.
Bless the Lord. Blessed assurance, Jesus is mine. Oh, what a foretaste of glory divine, fair of salvation, of God, born of His Spirit, washed with His blood. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. This is my story, this is my song, I'm praising my Savior all the day long. Blessed be the name of the God of all gods. Blessed be the name of the God whom I serve. Blessed be His holy name forever. He is light. He dispels all that is darkness. He is power. He is mighty. None can stand against Him. Glory and honor and praise be unto His name. I invoke His name in this today. I invoke His power in this hall today. I acknowledge His strength. I acknowledge His faithfulness. I acknowledge His love. I acknowledge His power. He is the Elohim, the Adonai, the El Shaddai. He that knows the end before the beginning and the beginning before the end. The Alpha and the Omega, the God of all flesh, the lily of the valley, the rose of Sharon, He that is high and lifted up, whose train fills the temple. None can stand against Him. None can overcome Him. Glory and honor and praise be unto Him this day. In Jesus' mighty name, I pray. Amen and amen. Let me begin by acknowledging the protocols and going through them once again as briefly as I possibly can before thanking you for giving me this great honor. I acknowledge the presence of the governor, Ayed Atiwa, that has been ably represented by my good friend and brother, Dr. Kayode Ajilosan, a wonderful man, a great son of the soil, and a great representative of the state. I shall say a few things about him later on in this little discourse. I acknowledge the presence of course, the Chief Judge of the state, Justice Odushola, represented ably by Justice A.O. Adebusoye. Thank you very much, sir. I acknowledge the presence of the President of the Customary Court of Appeal, Justice E.A. Alade, a wonderful lady, and a daughter of the soil, a daughter of the source. I acknowledge the presence of all the lordships and judges sitting here today, the most brilliant branch of the judiciary in this country as far as I'm concerned, because we all know about what they say about the people of Ondo State. Refined, educated, enlightened, very tough. Nobody can mess around with them. I acknowledge you. I acknowledge, of course, the awardee today, my very big brother, who has been a great mentor to me for so many years, an inspiration, a man filled with the Spirit of the living God, a man that has been guided by by God. Even through the most difficult times in our history, he has been there. That is Senator Bode Olajimoke. I acknowledge you, sir. I acknowledge the presence of one of my favorite uncles and one of the greatest sons of Nigeria, the great publisher, the elder statesman, a nationalist, a friend, and more like a younger brother of my father of blessed memory, Uncle Sam Awokapemu, who is an institution in our nation. I acknowledge you, sir, and I thank you for your service to this nation. I acknowledge the presence of the Olowo of all and all the other Obas that are seated here. May God continue to be with you, sirs. Did I say it right? God bless you, sir. And thank you for being such wonderful representatives of our culture and of our ancestry and our heritage. You're highly respected, and I appreciate you and I acknowledge you. Let me start by saying this, that it is a great honor for me to have been invited today to say a few words and share a few things with you in this great occasion. I actually feel underdressed because I see you all dressed in the way that you should be dressed as lawyers and men and women of the bar, and I feel as maybe I should have put on a suit, but I think I can still manage to say a few words without a suit. So thank you for inviting me, and let me also again say that I really am quite sorry that I was a little bit late. It's very unlike me. We left Abuja this morning at 2 a.m. having slept around 12, so I slept for 1 hour, woke up for 1. We left Abuja at 2 a.m. Unfortunately, the road between Abuja and Lokoja was really quite bad. It took us 3 hours to get through, but we managed to pull through. We got here safely and soundly, but I'm so sorry to have kept you waiting. So that's not where I am at all. I had to be here. I would have come in yesterday, but I had an important meeting with Governor Zulum, and I promised him that I'd stay for the meeting, but I purposed to travel. So we traveled all night, and it was worth it. And I'm glad to be standing before you, having been on the road for so many hours, and I just hope I can remember some of the things I wanted to say. I have a text which I will share and I'll read from. But for me, gatherings like this, as a matter of fact, as a rule, I speak extempore. So if you permit me, I'll just say a few words before I get to the text, which I will now read. And of course, the theme of this great occasion, the quest for a utilitarian judiciary and rules for stakeholders. That is a remarkable theme, an appropriate theme, and a theme that speaks to everything that we stand for. Why do I say that? Without a strong judiciary, without having a quest for a strong judiciary, and pursuing that quest and pushing it through, then the nation cannot stand. As a matter of fact, the judiciary is the backbone of any nation. And I'm proud of the fact that we have a remarkable judiciary in Nigeria and in this state. I say this from the bottom of my heart as somebody that has suffered political persecution for almost 18 years. And had it not been for the integrity and the strength and the courage of federal high court judges, courts of appeal judges, state high court judges, I wouldn't be standing before you today. Many people don't like to talk about their travails, but I do all the time, because the Bible tells us that we shall overcome them by the words, testimonies of our lips, and the blood of the Lamb. So I never forget the good that people do. People often criticize and say negative things, not just about the judiciary in Nigeria, but also about the legal profession. Or you don't know how good we really are until you're in trouble. That's when you'll know. When a government that is desperate to silence you, intimidate you, threaten you, and jail you for no just cause and will tell you, we will jail you because you said A, B, C, D, E. We'll find a way, and they throw everything they've got at you. The only thing that stands between you and that cell and that dungeon is one, God, and two, the judiciary. And in my case, and in the case of many others, the judiciary and God did a wonderful job. A wonderful job. In years, 18 years of persecution. First case, 7 years, appearing before 3 different judges. Second case, another 7 years, appearing before 3 different judges again. Another case, the third case, 9 years, appearing before 1 judge. And the final one, which was the last ditch by those that sought to silence me, lasted for 4 years. And every single one of those cases, every single one of those travails, I had absolute faith and confidence in the ability of our judges to do the right thing. I never knew any of them. I never met any of them. And there's nothing the executive did not do to get them to do the wrong thing. But they stood firm, and they stood for justice. And they stood for someone that had nobody and nothing but God. And I went through that fire. God saw me through. And the judiciary did the right thing. So I salute your courage. I salute your strength. I salute your independence and your ability to apply the law and to be discerning and to do the right thing. It doesn't stop there. We're talking about the judiciary. And I never planned to say all this. I have so many other things to say, but I'm led to say it, to encourage you and let you appreciate the importance of your work. After I was acquitted in 2016, having been prosecuted for 7 years, the judge that acquitted me, who I had never met before, she was approached by one of the security agencies. And she was told, I'll tell you who it was the EFCC under Magu, because things have changed now. You now have a human being heading that agency. In those days, they approached this lady and they told her that because you are acquitted Fani-Kayode, we are going to jail you and we're going to remove you from the bench. And she was shocked. She was shocked. They told her in front of her lawyer. Her lawyer's name was Galadima. He was one of Wale Babalaki's lawyers. He was sitting there. And the head of that agency in Lagos said, we're going to do that because we told you that even though he didn't do anything, you should have jailed him. And you refused. And you know what they did? They first of all engineered her removal as a judge. She was removed as a judge. After that, they prosecuted her. And they prosecuted her for 4 years. 4 good years of her life. At the end of it all, she was discharged and acquitted. And she was reinstated as a judge. And now she's a judge at the Federal High Court in Abuja. That is the power of God. That is justice. And that kind of evil is what we need to stand against. There are some in my very long travails. There are some judges that felt so intimidated. I saw it with my own eyes. But that's not the stuff of which the people of Ondo State or the judiciary of Ondo State is made of. You are made of much sterner stuff than that. And I'm very proud to be associated with you. I'm very proud of our judiciary. I'm proud of our lawyers, many of whom have fought long and hard to seek justice for others. Some of my lawyers were very young when we started. By the time it was all over, they're now senior advocates. There are so many of them. And I must say this, even Kayode was my lawyer in one of my cases. Remember the other one they tried to do and it all disappeared so quickly? And, you know, there are so many. But I must mention, set apart, a gentleman that is a son of the soil here, who did so well. That is Ifedayo Adedipe, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. An absolutely brilliant lawyer. Absolutely brilliant. Tough, courageous, scathing. I mean, honestly, I saw him cross-examining people. I wouldn't like to be on the receiving end of his cross-examination. A brilliant man. And most importantly, a man of conscience, a man of class, and a man of integrity. He's the son of this land. And I'm very proud of him, and I'm very proud of those of you that gave us to him, or rather gave him to us. I'm in the land of great men, like the present governor that you have now, and like the great Iroku, former governor Mimiko, the great Aketi, the former governor AKURE of blessed memory, the great Ajasi, the great governor Omoburiowo, men like Fasorati, the head of Afenifere, our president of Afenifere, Chief Olufalaye. I mean, I could go on and on and on. What a people you are. What a people you are. And let me tell you this. You have a great rising star from this land, who is presently the Minister of Internal Affairs. I've only ever met him once. We had a long talk. But if you know what he's doing in Abuja, and for this government, and for this nation, you have every reason to be very proud of him. He doesn't speak much, and I told him the day we met, he came to my house, he honored me with his presence, and by the time I heard the things he had achieved from him, and he spoke with such passion and conviction, and I told him, I said, look, the problem here is that it appears that people don't know what you have managed to do. He has done so much. And again, I thank you, the people of Ondo State, for giving Nigeria such a wonderful young man who is doing wonderful things for our nation. Now let me just quickly finish these remarks and I'll get to the script and you know, I am linked to Ondo State in a way in which you might find extraordinary. And it's a very deep link, and let me just share that with you very briefly. First of all, my great-grandfather was a priest. He took Christianity to Ife. He was trained and educated by the Anglicans, and he went to Furabe College in Sierra Leone to study theology. At that time, Furabe College was part of Durham University in the UK. So he finished there in 1897, and he came back and he was ordained as a pastor, as reverend, and he took Christianity to Ife. He established the first church there. He was an ordained Anglican priest. And among so many other things, he's the one that insisted that human sacrifice should be stopped in Ife. And as a consequence of efforts and great men of God, it was stopped. And that was one of his greatest achievements. But when he finished his first tenure in Ife, he went to Ondo, and he established a church here in Ondo, the Stephen's Church, in a place called Ode, Ondo, St. Stephen's Church. Ode, Ondo, sorry. He was there, he established the church there, and he was there for many, many years. And believe me, the greatest of all the Kayode as far as I'm concerned, because after doing 16 years, he now went to Ijebu, pastored another church there. Throughout his life, he was a pastor. But let me tell you what's interesting about that. And this is where all the law comes in. First son, that is, my grandfather became a lawyer. He went to Cambridge, studied law, he became a lawyer, he came back to Nigeria, excelled in that profession, and he was the third Nigerian to be made a judge. At that time, only white people were judges, and his contemporaries were people like Sergeant Ademola, who later became CJ, and so on and so forth. But he was the third to be made a judge. And before then, he practiced criminal law in Lagos Colony. And he did very, very well. But one of the things that I found the most amusing about what he managed to achieve was this. Sadly, he died early, otherwise he would have ended up in the Supreme Court. But one of the things he did, which you might find amusing, was that there was a time, Bristol Hotel in Lagos was the best hotel in Nigeria at the time. And there was a white man that was exceptionally rude to a Nigerian. And at that time, my grandfather had just come back from Cambridge, and he was filled with all kinds of ambitions and passion. And he ended up slapping the white man for being rude to a Nigerian. And he made headlines in those days. And when he was confronted and said, "Is it true that you gave this man a slap?" He said, "No, it's not true. I gave him 2 slaps because he was rude to one of our own." And he was now told, "You know, you could go to jail for that." He said, "It would be an honor to go to jail for defending my people." And you know what happened? 1 week later, the white man that that insulted the Nigerian at Bristol Hotel, he originally came from Kenya. He said he's leaving Nigeria because the Nigerian people are not like the blacks in Nigeria, are not like the blacks in Kenya. The ones in Nigeria are very stubborn and difficult. So he has to leave the country and go back to Kenya where he came from. And he went back to Kenya very quickly. But that is where it all started for us in terms of, he went on a flourishing career as a judge, like I said, he did so well. But his own son also, like him, went to Cambridge. That is my father. His own son also did very well in the tripos exams, and like him, came top in the bar exam for the whole of the British Commonwealth, just like my grandfather had done. His own son also excelled in the legal profession, and he was the 3rd Nigerian to be made a King's Counsel, QC in those days, and the 3rd Nigerian to be made a senior advocate in Nigeria. And of course, he set up the first indigenous law firm in this country, Thomas Kayode and the great Rotimi Williams. That was the first indigenous law firm. And he did very well as a lawyer. As a matter of fact, that was his calling. And that is our calling as a family. From there, he went into politics, moved the motion for Nigeria's independence successfully, and went on to do so many other things. Then it came to our generation. I also went to London and Cambridge University. I also did my best. I also came out and practiced for a while. I also went into politics. But why I'm saying all this is for this reason, and for this reason alone. The law is essentially a divine calling, and it prepares you for anything you seek to set your hand to do. It gives you strength and courage, and it sharpens your mind, and it causes you to excel in every way. And so if you are a lawyer, or if you are a judge, or associated with that whole arena, you know you already have an advantage in life. And we need that quality of mind and those type of people in every sphere of human endeavor in the world, and indeed in this country, particularly at this time. Sharp minds. Too many brilliant lawyers stay only with the law throughout their lives. Forgive me for saying this. We need more and more of them. Not just those that like politics, but those that are serious-minded lawyers. Men and women with sharp, eagle eyes and sharp minds and sharp tongues to come into the political arena to make our country a much better place. We need that. And I pray to God that we will achieve that. Because without that, we cannot have anything that we seek to achieve in this country. I never meant to say so much before getting to the text of what I really came here to say today. And you will forgive me if I read the text very quickly, if that's okay, so that we can get this over and done with. And again, you will forgive me when I come to such gatherings. I don't think I should just come here and say a few nice things, niceties, and we all say thank you and goodbye. I believe this is an opportunity to share things about our country and indeed the world that will be meaningful and impactful and will spark off debate and discussion. Especially when the issues raised are very, very serious issues. Our nation has been threatened. So much is going on now, so much is being said, religious differences, and therefore I felt it was appropriate for me to say and share the following with you. So here goes my address, and I'll be as brief as possible. I believe that it's been shared, so if you care to, you could actually follow if you choose. It's titled, Bow to God and Not to Trump. Bow to God and not to Trump. That's the title. And it goes like this. Mr. James Barnett, a PhD candidate at Oxford University, wrote the following in an essay titled, Nigeria's Crisis Runs Deeper Than Just a War on Christians, for the Washington Post a few days ago. He wrote, inter alia, that, quote, Christians absolutely are being threatened and killed in parts of Nigeria. I can personally attest to it, but to frame Nigeria's crisis entirely in that way badly distorts the complicated and tragic reality on the ground. Shaping U.S. policy around such distortions, especially when U.S. troops may be put in harm's way, will not yield good outcomes. For several years, I lived and worked in Nigeria, studying its conflicts and interviewing different militant groups. I would never advise anyone to downplay the suffering of Christians who have experienced horrific attacks. I have seen and heard from many victims firsthand, but I have also seen the impact of similarly horrific violence across Muslim communities. To ignore the latter is to misunderstand what is really going on. Voices ranging from former Trump officials to the Vatican have cautioned against framing Nigeria's complex insecurity in solely religious terms. Conflict has grown rampant in Nigeria under successive governments, and the country now faces various militant groups pursuing different agendas. Lumping them all together and reducing their motives to anti-Christian animus in state. End of quote. Now, in my view, Barnett is absolutely right. I sincerely hope and pray for all our sakes that someone in the White House is listening before it's too late. Permit me to begin this contribution with the following basic point. My belief is that we must eliminate every single terrorist and those that are sponsoring them in Nigeria. I do not believe in dialogue with them or forgiving them. I do not believe in negotiation with them. I do not believe in pampering them or managing them. I do not believe in rehabilitating them into the Nigerian armed forces. I believe in crushing them and sending them to their maker, and in doing so quickly and decisively. This has been my position for the last 20 years, and it will always be my position. Demons and vampires do not have any place in the land of the living, and they have no right to life. The Bible tells us that there can be no fellowship between light and darkness, and you either choose God or Belial. I choose God. Every single one of them, whether they be Boko Haram, ISWAP, Ansaru, Qaeda, JNIR, Lakurawa, the killer herdsmen, the kidnapping bandits, or any other, must be dispatched to hell where they came from, and our country must be cleansed of their filth and verminous evil. They are a cancerous plague that must be eradicated with clinical precision by brute force. Outside of that, I believe that genocide ethnic cleansing, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and mass murder of the most horrendous nature has been carried out by each of these groups in Nigeria over the last 20 years against Christians. And I have been saying so for many years, perhaps more than anyone else. But today, there is a difference and a caveat that makes the problem even more horrendous than it already is, and which we ignore at our own peril. The caveat and difference, and this has been so for the last 10 years, and is a fact that many, including yours truly, were totally oblivious and blind to, is the fact that their villainous and callous butchery was not limited to Christians alone. They butcher the Muslims too, and they do so in equal, if not greater numbers. That is the reality and the challenge that we are faced with, which is lost on many, whether anyone cares to believe it or not. We are all victims today, and not just the Christians, and this does not in any way diminish the suffering that the Christian community has experienced for many years. It only means that we have not suffered it alone. The solution to the problem is for our political leadership and armed forces to muster the resolve and political will to ruthlessly wipe out the Islamist terrorists and foreign militias once and for all. That is an obligation that falls on the shoulders of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu alone, and he must honor it. From what I have seen so far, it appears that he has the fortitude and courage to do that, but he must go all the way and finish the job. The world and the Nigerian people want to see concrete action and implementation of extraordinarily ruthless, violent, and aggressive methods, and not just hear long talk, promises of success, or long-winded and outworn platitudes from government officials. To be fair, Are we okay now? Thank you very much. Yeah. So, to be fair to the security apparatus and the current administration, more terrorists have been killed in the past 2 years than the previous 8 years put together. Yet they keep it quiet, which is something I don't understand, but they are killing them. This is commendable, but they must go further. The Nigerian people are paying for the blood of these terrorists, and they must see it flow into an ocean of divine retribution. What certainly doesn't help is when, instead of that, we are assaulted and provoked with pictures and video footage of Islamist terrorists having so-called peace talks with state government officials in places like Katsina. Yet, as traumatizing as all this may be, our greatest challenge today comes not from the Islamist terrorists in the north, or even the equally barbaric savagery of separatist groups in the southeast like ESN, but rather from the wild, puerile, and infantile tantrums, psychotic delusions, and sadistic disposition of the Jekyll and Hyde character, feral psychopath, and malevolent narcissist who currently presides over the affairs of the United States of America and who sits in the White House. Let me make this clear. Anyone that does not fully appreciate the fact that Donald Trump's motives for threatening our nation with war are disingenuous, self-serving, baseless, unfounded, and questionable, and anyone that does not recognize the fact that his mental instability, thin skin, fragile ego, incendiary emotions, pernicious deceit, avaricious appetite, obsession with money, lust for power, low intelligence quotient, and volatile disposition is capable of driving him into actually dropping bombs on Nigeria and sending in American ground troops for no just cause. Anyone that doubts that does not know Trump. Make no mistake, his intention is not to help us fight the terrorists or to save Christians in Nigeria, but rather to drive a wedge between Christians and Muslims, ignite the fire of a brutal and never-ending religious war, establish a Sudan-like arena of butchery and carnage, send in the Marines or Derek Prince's CIA-funded private army of Blackwater mercenaries, and finally carve up and occupy our land and pillage our rare earth, gold, lithium, uranium, diamonds, gems, precious metals, crude oil, aluminium, natural gas, and other mineral resources. His intention is not to help our country fight the terrorists and rid us of them, but to subject it to the same thing that they did to Yugoslavia in the 1990s, by bombing the entire country to smithereens, shattering our fragile unity, and breaking us up into 5 or more smaller countries and vassal states, each of which will be compelled to have US military bases, each of which will take orders from Washington, and each of which they will control, manipulate, and dominate. Total and complete oppression, subjugation, and recolonization. That is their ultimate objective. And anyone that cannot see or appreciate that knows nothing about the intrigues and deadly power play of world politics or world history, and is chronically and woefully blind. It is true that Christians have suffered immeasurably in our country over the years and have been subjected to genocide, ethnic cleansing, mass murder, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and the most vicious and pernicious forms of persecution at the hands of foreign-backed terrorists and Islamist militias. But it is not true that they are the only ones that have suffered this terrible fate and horrendous ordeal. Muslims have suffered the same fate in equal measure at the hands of the same barbaric monsters and terrorists. As a matter of fact, if you want to talk about state-sponsored persecution and genocide in the north over the last 20 years, it is not the northern Christians that were subjected to this, but rather the Shia Muslims of Kaduna, who had over 1,000 of their members slaughtered in one afternoon in Zaria, Kaduna State in 2016, simply for blocking a road when General Tuku Burutai was Chief of Army Staff, Nasir El-Rufai was Governor of Kaduna State, and President Muhammadu Buhari was President. Outside of that, I am not aware that Christian communities in northern Nigeria were targeted for elimination or mass murders by officers of the state anytime or anywhere over the last 20 years. They have been targeted by non-state actors and terrorist militias, but certainly not officers of the Nigerian military, as the Americans are trying to suggest. Trump claims that Nigerian Christians are facing an existential threat, yet this is far from the truth. It is true that many Christians and Muslims are being targeted and killed by terrorists in Nigeria, but it is not true to suggest that Christianity is facing an existential threat. And if it is true, then it means that Muslims are facing an existential threat as well. Now, how can we be facing an existential threat when there are over 120 million Christians in our nation, which represents 50% of the overall population? How can we be facing an existential threat when every single one of the 17 states in southern Nigeria and 3 of the 19 states in the north are headed by Christians and chief security officers, Christian governors and chief security officers? How can we be facing an existential threat when 62% of all government appointments have been given to Christians under the Tinubu administration? How can we be facing an existential threat when the Senate President, the Secretary to the federal government, and the majority of federal ministers, including those that preside over key ministries, like the Minister of Finance and Coordinated Economy, the Minister of Federal Capital Territory, the Minister of Internal Affairs, the Minister of Works, the Minister of Communications and Digital Economy, the Minister of Marine and Blue Economy, the Minister of Aviation and Aerospace, the Minister of State for Oil, the Minister of State for Gas, the Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, and so many more are all Christians? How can we be facing an existential threat when the Chief of Defense Staff, the Chief of Air Staff, the Chief of Defense Intelligence, the Inspector General of Police, the Director General of the DSS, the Chairman of the EFCC, the Director of Military Intelligence, the Controller General of Immigration, the Controller General of Prisons, and so many more that head our nation's military, paramilitary, and security agencies are Christians. How can we be facing an existential threat when for the previous 8 years, before Tinubu came to power, every single operational security chief in our nation's 17 security organizations was a northern Muslim? Yet when he assumed office, he changed all that and balanced the equation by appointing and including Christians. How can we be facing an existential threat when the governor of Central Bank, the chairman of the Tax Reform Committee, and the chairman of FIRS are all Christians? How can we be facing an existential threat when 3 out of the 10 largest, richest, and most powerful and influential churches and church leaders in the world, who have broken enormous boundaries and spread the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ in a remarkable and groundbreaking way, both in our nation and outside of it, are Nigerians? How can we be facing an existential threat when the president's wife is not only a Pentecostal Christian, but also a pastor? How can we be facing an existential threat when, for the first time in many years, Christians are treated with respect and accorded decorum in all spheres of human endeavor in our nation ever since Tinubu took over the reins of power? We may be facing a strong challenge from Islamist terrorist organizations, and there may be tensions between Christians and Muslims in some parts of our country. But to say that Christianity is facing an existential threat in Nigeria is not only absurd, but also betrays a sinister and malevolent motive in the hearts and minds of those who propagate and assert it. They are crying wolf where there is none, and they are setting us up for the kill. Trump is driven by a pathological hatred for Africans, black and brown people, and Muslims. He's also driven by an overwhelming, compulsive, all-consuming, and inexplicable greed and avarice for material things. He has been afflicted with what those of us in Pentecostal circles describe as a demastic anointing, named after Apostle Paul's royal disciple called Demas, who lost his way and fell in love with worldly things, which has resulted in his obsession with, in addition to, the lust of the eye, the lust of the flesh, the lust of power, the lust for treasure, the lust for land, and the pride of life. He's also totally and completely irrational, unpredictable, and unbalanced, which makes him a very real danger to the entire world. His words must not be taken lightly, and we must prepare for the very worst. Those that believe that he can be talked into not doing what he clearly wants to do to our nation are ignorant, undiscerning, and deluded, and they are oblivious of his innate and irredeemable lunacy. I say this because there are speculations and reports in the media that President Tinubu seeks to meet with him at the White House in an attempt to resolve all the issues. If true, such an initiative is as incredulous as it is baffling, and it will come to naught. As a matter of fact, it may make matters worse, as our president may be verbally and savagely assaulted, insulted, and berated right in front of the White House press corps. Surely our Jagaban is bigger and better than that, and he certainly does not deserve it. And neither will he take it lying low, like others have done. Some have said that our president may opt to meet with Trump or his vice, J.D. Vance, on the sidelines at the G20 meeting, which is scheduled to hold on the 20th of November in South Africa. One wonders why some of our government officials that say such things find it necessary to clutch at straws, rather than to cultivate a firm resolve to stand up for the government they serve and their country and act with a level of self-respect, decorum, and dignity. I say this given the fact that Trump has said that no U.S. government official will attend the G20 meeting in South Africa because the white Afrikaans people of that country are, according to him, being subjected to genocide, whilst their farmlands are supposedly being confiscated without compensation. He concluded by saying that he believes that South Africa is a disgrace and should not even be a member of the G20. I ask those that are indulging in wishful thinking and fantasy about this proposed peace meeting between Trump and Tinubu in South Africa at the G20 meeting, who exactly our president is supposed to meet and discuss our problems with on the sidelines once they are given the fact that the Americans have made it clear that they are not attending. It is important facts right. Otherwise, it complicates the issue. Diplomacy is one thing, but shameful capitulation with our tail between our legs is quite another. Outside of that, it is trite that the open and public display of weakness and fear attracts even more aggression. Surely, we are bigger, better, and stronger than that. We are not a nation of slaves and beggars. We are not a nation of cowards and peasants who bow and tremble before a schoolyard bully. I do not understand the logic and cannot appreciate the wisdom in seeking to sit down with a man who has contempt for you and your people, who considers you and them as being subhuman, who has referred to your country as a disgraced one, and who has referred to your continent as a, excuse my language, shithole. You are talking about diplomacy and a diplomatic settlement when the man and country that you're up against has thrown diplomacy out of the window, designated your country as one of concern, has placed your nation on a watch list, and has said that he intends to violate your sovereignty on a false premise, bomb your country, and attack you with his military. His defense minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Press Secretary, and other key government officials have reiterated the threat, and you are hiding under the table and saying that it will be resolved at the G20 meeting in South Africa, when you know very well that Trump said he has no intention of attending that meeting. When will those in high places in Nigeria learn that you do not kowtow to Nazis, racists, religious bigots, ethnic supremacists, ethnic cleansers, schoolyard bullies, genocide enablers, lawless brigands, treasure hunters, drunken sailors, shape-shifting reptilians, sons of perdition, and those that threaten the very essence of our existence? When will you accept the fact that you have no choice but to stand up to them? When will you appreciate the fact that peace without honor, self-respect, and dignity is a curse? When will you understand that the peace of the graveyard, in which we must smile as we are being insulted, ravaged, and threatened, is no peace at all, but rather the most refined and supreme form of servitude, bondage, and torment? I would rather die on my feet as a free man than live on my knees as a slave. We are a nation of 250 million people. We are not weak and we are not small. We are resilient and strong, and our spirit cannot be broken. We are too big to take this nonsense from anyone. We liberated Sierra Leone. We liberated Liberia. We liberated Sao Tome and Principe. We liberated South Africa. We liberated Chad. We liberated Zimbabwe. We liberated Congo. We liberated Angola. We liberated Somalia. We liberated Mozambique. We liberated Namibia. We liberated Zambia. We liberated Uganda. We liberated Kenya. We liberated Equatorial Guinea. We liberated Burma. And if it comes to it, and we are attacked or occupied by the Yankees, by the grace and power of God, we shall liberate ourselves. The Bible says, the Lord shall trouble those who trouble us, and that he shall contend against those who contend against us. Pharaoh, Herod, Nebuchadnezzar, Jezebel, and Sennacherib fell, and so will the bestial creature that sits in the White House, who issues brazen threats against us and refuses to let my people go. You call my country a disgraced country, as if yours were any better. You say you will come in, quote, guns blazing, as if you are in the old Wild West, and that you are dealing with a small tribe of defenseless native Indians and Aborigines. You say it will be fast, vicious, and sweet, as if you are a rapist. Who the hell are you, and who do you think you are talking to? Are you God? Not all of us are intimidated by you in this country. Not all of us are cowards and cheerleaders. Not all of us fear death or are too timid to speak up in defense of our nation. Not all of us have lost our sense of self-worth, self-respect, and dignity. Let me assure you that those turncoats and blacklegs that are on their knees begging you not to attack us and calling for dialogue and understanding are a minority. The majority of us cannot bear your insolence, arrogance, and corrosive disposition, and will stand up to you like men despite the odds. We reject any form of dialogue or understanding with you, as long as you keep threatening us with violence and tormenting us with insults. How can there be dialogue and talks with a bully and a thug who believes we are subhuman and who has contempt for us? How can there be dialogue with a man who defies the living God and who openly oppresses and supports the genocide of both Christians and Muslims all over the world? How can there be dialogue with a man who supports the barbarity of the state of Israel and the evil of Zionism, and who sees Arabs, Muslims, people of color, and those that do not share his morbid worldview of American supremacy and domination as nothing better than lapdogs and rodents? If you honestly believe that it will be easy for you to take on a nation of 250 million people like ours, then please try your luck and go ahead. I advise you not to be fooled by the treasonous, ignorant, and cowardly malcontents, never-do-well, vultures, whores, secessionists, traitors, and cheerleaders in our country, who have chosen to be your accomplices and co-conspirators, and that are telling you to come in to conquer and kill us all. They are a misguided, confused, and deluded bunch of servile minions and perfidious quislings who do not know the implications of what they are saying and who have sold their souls and lost their minds. Satan is using them to justify your lust for the shedding of Nigerian blood and your desire to destroy God's plan and purpose for our great country. They do not represent us because the overwhelming majority of our people are loyal, united, fiercely patriotic souls who refuse to be intimidated by you and who will never accept to be your vassals. If you come in guns blazing as you have threatened, know this: you will suffer the consequences in a dramatic way, as American soldiers will be forced to pay a heavy price and many will not survive it. Worst of all, you will ignite a war in our sub-region that will result in all your strategic interests being burnt to ashes. You may destroy our country and spark off a religious war, which is what you want, but ultimately you will get tired, you will lose, and you will run away with your tail between your legs, as you have done everywhere else that you go, and indulge in your vile and fruitless military adventures. You lost in Somalia and ran away. You lost in Afghanistan and ran away. You lost in Korea and ran away. You lost in Vietnam and ran away. You lost in Iraq and ran away. You lost in Cuba and ran away. You lost in Nicaragua and ran away. You tested Iran and got a bloody nose. The only reason you won the First and Second World War and defeated the Germans is because of the help and support you received from Russia and the Soviet Union respectively. Actually, it was the Soviets that defeated the Germans in World War II and took Berlin, and not you. After 20 million Russians lost their lives. What a great and noble sacrifice that great country made to free the world and to stop the Nazis. The question is, what was yours outside of dropping 2 nuclear bombs on innocent and defenseless Japanese citizens in the cities of Nagasaki and Hiroshima, killing hundreds of thousands in a matter of seconds? Where is your invincibility? You have none, and neither are you infallible. Today, you threaten, intimidate, and insult Venezuela, Colombia, Mexico, South Africa, Brazil, Canada, Nicaragua, Gaza, Yemen, Cuba, Syria, China, Russia, North Korea, India, Pakistan, Turkey, Denmark, Ukraine, Burkina Faso, Mali, Namibia, Niger, Chad, Sudan, and much of Europe and the Middle East, and you treat their respective leaders with disdain and contempt. Truth is, you have emasculated and castrated most of them and turned them into a bunch of quivering quislings that are little better than your house help. Yet you will soon find out that we in Nigeria are very different to others. When faced with intimidation, we do not easily bend. When faced with intimidation, we do not easily bend the knee. Do not mistake the apparent timidity and low self-esteem of many of our leaders for weakness on the part of our people. We are polite, patient, humble, kind, compassionate, accommodating, and long-suffering. But at the same time, we are strong-willed, proud, stubborn, confident, courageous, adventurous, and extremely tough. Our strength lies in our spiritual foundation and faith and belief in God, which makes us slow to anger, but irresistible in battle. The Lord will finally humble you if you try any nonsense with us, and He will take the battle right back to your own doorsteps in America. Like David said to Goliath before the historic battle, I say to you, Donald Trump, who is this uncircumcised Philistine that has chosen to defy the armies of the living God? Like David, I say our defense lies not in sophisticated arms and nuclear weapons, but rather in the power and might of the living God, who is irresistible in battle. I say thy servant slew the lion and the bear, and so it shall be for this uncircumcised Philistine who has chosen to defy the armies of the living God. We are the anointing of the Lord, and He has a special purpose for our nation at this end time. Touch us and see your end. Strike us and know that we are not the cowardly weaklings that you perceive us to be. Attack us and discover that we are made of steel, and that even though you may level our city and spill our blood, you will never break our firm resolve or shatter our irrepressible spirit. And neither will you ever make us forget who we are and the proud and noble stock from which we come. Whether you like it or not, Nigeria is great, and Nigeria shall remain great. We are not a disgraced nation, but rather a strong and proud nation that has achieved far more than you care to know, and shall achieve even more well into the distant future, after you are dead and buried. May the Lord defend our borders and seal them with His precious blood. And may He deliver us from the evil hand and wicked intentions of our detractors and enemies. He surely will, because He is faithful, just and true. He is the defender of the weak, the champion of the poor, and the liberator of the oppressed. We shall not go the way of Sudan, Darfur, Gaza, Palestine, Congo, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Yugoslavia, Somalia, Afghanistan, or any of the other nations that they have shattered, destroyed, broken, brought to ruin, and blighted with their wickedness and vile intrigues. And neither shall our nation be subjected to war or a violent and unconstitutional regime change. We are Nigerians. We serve and worship a mighty God, and by His power we shall survive all these threats and intrigues, and we shall overcome. The Lord will see to that. The Lord will see to that. Glory and honor, praise.